Alright, hey, what's up everyone? This is another video from yours truly, Troll 23, and the title of this video is My Acne Story. Trials and Tribulations of Suffering Cystical Hormonal Acne at My 20s. Notes on the Black Pill '01. And this is basically a re-recording of the same video that I made. I I read the comments and frankly, on my own judgment, I believe the video is a lot of more yapping than it should. And I agree that needs to have volume augmentation. So I decided to basically refactor the code, basically redo it again for the sake of this video. And henceforth, I'll stick with the date that I actually made the slides, August 2nd, 2025. The agenda for today is basically what is cystical hormonal acne and what can cause this. Basically, explain briefly in a pragmatical aspect why it matters, why you should care about it, what can cause this, and basically explain from a briefly anatomical level and to an extent a medical dermatological explanation what can cause this to understand the severity of my condition. My teenage experience with pimples, self-explanatory. I'll explain how I felt it on my teenage years, and now, in contrast, my current experience with acne. So on and so forth. The evolution of the condition, which I documented quite thoroughly as a memento mori of my, frankly, quite a journey that I've been having. Final thoughts as a form of a conclusion and references, if any. All right. So, what is cystical hormonal acne and what can cause this? Simply put, the pimples can hurt if pressed, or if they grew in very inconspicuous places. It goes without saying that besides being a very big facial facial hinder in your attractive, a very big hinder in your attractiveness, facially speaking, and well, aesthetically speaking, the severity of the lesions that I have, which is the technical term for the acne pustules, besides being basically a glow down to your attractiveness, is that it tend to hurt. They tend to hurt a lot. So you can guess from this experience that I tended to pick my pimples severely because basically I want is was the only practical way that I knew how to basically get rid of the pain. On a more technical aspect, acne on average is caused by a bacteria known as C. acnes or C. bacterium acnes, so goes without saying, which leverages the abnormal skin of a patient which is predisposed to sweating a lot, which I do have, greasy skin, which I do have, very open pores as a matter of fact, and bad diet and whey protein ingestion, which is this last one is important for later. If untreated, of course, it can leave severe acne scars by virtue of just existing. And besides, picking your pimples, which also involve other rounds of treatments besides medication, which, from a very cost analysis perspective, like actual investing your money, if you will, your labor, if you are working, you're hiring to get it to perform a job, it's something you must consider. On a more dermatological, like actual to the skin level, basically the main problem in my case is that my unhealthy sebaceous glands tend to secrete a lot of sebum. Basically, they produce more grease of the greasy skin that I tend to have that it should. So given that this overproduction of sebum on my skin makes bacteria to grow a colony within the pimples. And as you may have guessed, given that the immune system is fighting against it, it creates pus as a way to basically clog the pore, it clog the bacteria to blockade them from entering of the skin. Depending on, of course, the way this is evolved, if this is fruitful, the bacteria grow as open comedones. Excuse me, the bacteria with a sealed pore will become an open comedone, which is basically a blackhead. And the worst ones that I had are papules and pustules. Papules and pustules in general basically is the second level of the whitehead, which is now a more inflamed level of the whitehead in this case. And pustule, though, it goes without saying, this pus, which is basically like the clogging of all of these bacteria and your immune cells fighting against this, just basically this external agent, makes it very jading to your body because it inflammates the skin. As you may have guessed, depending on how clogged they are, you ought to know how painful it was to have them. My teenage experience with pimples is, to simply put, horrible. My pubescent changes seem to have altered my skin barrier to no avail. Besides the previous that I stated, I also have developed a lot of bodily hair, like actual thick bodily hair. I am very smelly and sweaty, so it's a trip like a quadruple whammy to no avail. A big tendency to have irritated skin, which was very much prior to my hormone sprout, my testosteronic hormone sprout of my pubescent years, and the severe plus the severe cystic acne on top of facial hair. So you can imagine grooming for basically a middle school. In Mexico, most middle schools are quite rigid on their grooming requirements for men. So you I don't know how fucking jading was to fulfill the requirements of my school. Case in point, I had luckily enough no bullying from my peers, but I had a lot of self-esteem, self-doubts about my image, and hence for a lot of self-esteem issues. My prospects in dating, of course, were horrible, and that also transpired into me being extremely self-conscious of myself, which to an extent it's been explained by the black pill. As you ought to know, having this frankly debilitating condition is basically horrible in itself. But besides that, I remembered that I had this very, I guess, deprecating realization of the following: how I would want a girl to kiss me, huh? If only I knew then. If I have pimples on my lips and it's gonna hurt me, why I would do something that is supposed to be joyful and be hurtful at the same time? It's just torture in itself. But of course, even besides that, I kind of knew that it mattered and was over. Ironically enough, the only thing that helped me carry on was my connection to music, which in this regard, I learned to play the electric guitar and became very proficient on it and at it. So my music is basically divorced dad rock in itself, so which also ties to the topic of this video. I related deeply to the jadedness of basically being a human, if you will, and being a man to be more specific. That's why this type of music was quite relatable to me. So, which is something I'll never sacrifice for any man or woman for that matter. But regardless, it was basically the stereotypical emo type thing, as that song of Incubus, whatever tomorrow brings up, I'll be there, I guess. But now my current experience with acne, ironically enough, the self-improvement craze of 2022 was an indirect cause. Why is that? You may ask. It's because I started taking my image seriously. After learning about, to an extent, the red pill esque way of knowing that looks matter, basically just good muscles, bro, which I kind of knew that was bullshit in my experience. And regardless, I entered a CrossFit gym and lost a ton of weight during the first 3 months. I assessed Rehab Room's assessment that most of the important changes on any self improvement journey must be done or must be experienced or at least be noticeable in the first 3 months. Wholeheartedly agree based on empirical evidence. I noticed that I had good facial bones, which was I guess, the main baseline that made me stick to the plans, if you will. My only mistake was taking whey protein, which I didn't know that I could detonate my dormant predisposition towards acne. It's now well documented that any type of derivative of whey proteins is highly correlated to Cutibacterium acnes and the severity of this condition, which in this time where I was undergoing a professional nutritionist, excuse me, she basically prescribed me to take whey protein, which of course, unbeknownst to both of us, was the big mistake that I made nutritionally. The last straw in this case was that made me decide to fix it once and for all was seeing a big ass cyst near the right of my front clavicle, which had killed my confidence overnight. To put it in context, we were on my family getting ready to go to the beach. I live near the west coast, so you gotta know how it is. Like, cool, unironically feeling more confident, bro, to look at my body. Like, cool, maybe get some girls. I don't know, but feel good with myself, which I haven't felt in a while. Besides dating, of course. Regardless, when I was putting my tank top, I realized that I have a big ass simple in my cyst, and I just stared back in my on the bathroom, basically looking like Lelouch Lamperouch's overtly angry and diabolical face expression that I had. This is how I felt, and it decided me to fix it once and for all. No bitching out, no hesitation, no going back. Which now basically means that I'm undergoing Accutane to put it on remission. So far, I had very good results besides the main side effects. The main side effect of chapped lips, which is frankly very manageable, and even at a cost like monetary wise, this basically became a second part of my beauty routine, if you will. The cost of my treatment so far, accumulating the costs from 2022 to 2025, are basically refactored factored in three main elements so far. The number one is of course the Accutane pills, which is sell at a cap of 20 milligrams in Mexico. Is for 30 pills was now I accumulated around 450 US dollars of this medication so far, as you can see on the image. That's how severe I had it to basically be on this, having a lot of boxes of this. The terms appointments accumulated to 200 US dollars, and given that I became their loyal, if you will, customer, loyal patient, they basically capped me out to the $200 that I already invested on the consultations. I believe it's out of the dermatolog, the derm's goodwill, so I thank her for that. And the most heavy-handed for my pocket is the laser scalp treatments, given that I have a very severe, as you will see, a very severe scars. Besides my picked pimples and my now recurrent pimples, it of course stretched my skin out. Regardless, I am in a much better place now, and I even got some dates with my type of girls. To put it in perspective, I currently have invested around 250, excuse me, 200 and 2250 US dollars, which for my now job that I have is basically peanuts compared to everything that I've gained besides money, which is looks. The evolution of the condition is basically that, as the main point states, is that Accutane might start a purge, which worsens the acne for a while. Loosely speaking, it gets worse before it gets better. And on September 2022 is where I had the big ass pimple on my cyst, which I didn't took a photo because for me it was too much even for me to remember. So I took it on how it looked on my face. Regardless, after ingesting Accutane, I see the side effects right from the get-go. On October 2022 onwards is when I see a big evolution of the severity of my pimples. My sweet spot for taming acne in general, in my case, is around 6 months of 20 milligrams of Accutane. I forgot, my mistake, a typo. Accutane daily. On December 2022, you could see that my pimples basically start to level themselves out, and onwards, the lesions have have become less and less in severity and basically quantity, which is a big plus in my experience. If I'm not mistaken, it's around January where I don't have any that big ass cystical pimple in my clavicle, which it was a big plus in my opinion. In August, excuse me, it was actually April. From April to excuse me, March to April is where I notice basically no noticeable changes besides the scarring that I need to fix. By my dermatologist's recommendation, we stopped the Accutane treatment to check the reaction of my body, which is quite customary for each patient to undergo to see how it goes, how you react. Fair enough. This happened during an internship at the UCSD. Yes, that UCSD of the West Coast, so you can guess how it ended. After basically this point, my acne started to spurt out violently. So again, arguably one of the worst pimples that I ever had, and I can't recall, well, willfully or not, is where I get limesicline prescribed, which is a very potent antibiotic. Because, well, let's face it, the idea is to not be prescribed for life. Of course, the history tells now that I should. So as far as I can tell, But regardless, at this moment, limesicline is prescribed, and you can see that my case evolves quite violently. So my acne is so severe that on September it came back worse than ever. But now I had the fortune of knowing what I need to do, but I had the will to do it. This is where I tend to ask myself, seeing the photo that I'm showing for that I am, displaying for September 2023 is that I don't want to be like that. Besides dating, I had like a fancy with a very pretty cute girl, like 6, 7 out of 10. Kind of looking like this because I had less sharp jawline, so I kind of sticked out. But knowing that I had the bones, but the packaging, if you will, like the packaging very shit, it was something that I told me like, no, not anymore. I had the potential. I'll not let it go to waste. But believe me, on September and this time, I was genuinely willing to give up again. But my guts, my reason, the black pill, my how shit I felt on middle school where I didn't felt like I kind of fitted in within me. Don't even get me started outside of me. You ought to know what I needed to do. But man, it hit me like a truck knowing that I still had the severity. So it's like bullshit, man. But I stick to it. I stick to the plan. Accutane is prescribed again, and my body reacts positively against acne. Again, given the severity of the lesions, again, is prescribed on a daily basis, reminding you again 20 milligrams per day. On October 2023, you see that the severity has become less, but again, the pimples start to show quite violently, like very big papules and pustules, sometimes even with pus, as you could see on one of the photos. And again, onwards, the severity of the lesions have been less and less. But as you could see, at least on my acne is quite frequent on my cheekbones. So it's something of notice, and also near the cheekbones and the connection to the brow ridge. So that's where I have the most amount of scars. Around February, I get hired after college in a job regarding my degree. In context, I graduated from computer systems engineering, which is basically computer science, the computer science equivalent on my country. It helps to pay the treatments plus extras, and also keeping my mind, occupied for what I should do. Besides that, given that I work with Koreans and regarding my job, and of course speaking English, that helps out tremendously. And of course, having very clear skin and trying to an extent fit in with the culture, at least the Korean standard of beauty, it helps out tremendously to have the clearest skin I could get. And basically, I got a very good return on investment. But from a very interpersonal level, I felt finally much more peace after basically having my first actually let down on in recent memory. Starting April, I don't observe any heavy nodules, neither my dermatologist, which is a very huge win in my opinion. By my dermatologist's recommendation, the Accutane pill dosage is now every 4 days. Given that the basically the experiment, unbeknownst to my derm's judgment, which of course I'll always say that I was in good faith that she didn't meant to damage me, but again my body reacted quite violently. So now the way to put my acne in remission is to basically take the Accutane pill every four days. Less violently so, but again, given that we want to put it on remission, now we went on with the phase of laser scar procedures. And given this, well, it's one of the things that I'm currently undergoing. I'm not sure if the photos, though the brief slideshow displays it in full detail, but you could see that my scarring has become less and less. Besides, of course, lighting and the angles that I took, which are very poor, if I may criticize my skills. Case in point is that I've been undergoing them at the same time, and also in full disclosure, I had another treatment, which was a radius treatment, basically for free from the derm's clinic. So it was a huge plus. Regardless, the improvement on my skin has been basically slow but steady and very good steadily. So, which for me, it's something that I'm willing to take. Final thoughts on this. The number one and the most important is that acne can be a very debilitating very debilitating on one's own self-esteem. And of course, courtship with the opposite sex. It goes without saying that your skin matters, so looks matter. If you have the baseline like me, the actual structure, the actual bones, why not take it? I mean, the only thing needed to be fixed was my, I guess, the packaging, if you will. Do not take whey protein if you are acne prone. Do not repeat my mistake. This is the one that you should take in clear. That's why sometimes many bodybuilders and roid users tend to have acne is because their bodies don't tolerate that amount of testosterone. If this is what the so-called red pillars claim to be more masculine, bro, honestly, fuck them. Like bullshit. This is you are basically putting many self-men to failure, soon to be functional members of society, male members of society to failure. And if you are considering this and you're acne prone, please do not repeat my mistake. Learn by my experience. Don't be another subject of clinical study. And please, again, don't pick your pimples. You'll, if you're still young and for some I guess, God forsaken reason, you see this, please don't pick your pimples. Don't make my mistake. You're gonna save a lot of time, effort, and money on the long run. I know that the temptation is big, but please don't do it. If I only knew that it would be way worse than it was, and I would save a lot of money if I didn't. Regardless, Accutane is the last resort option. It requires a slight change in your habits to maximize its efficacy. You ought to know that given that I basically tried everything to not go to not undergo any medication and a very heavy medication on my liver, I may add. It's just a last resort option, which again depends on how how willing you are to tolerate, this gas tribulation. And again, it's not your fault. It's most likely genetics, such as mine. It goes without saying, but if you haven't tried and tried, sometimes maybe not be your fault.